I am Lauren Stein. I'm the manager of implementation at Allterity. Today we've got a guest speaker who's going to go over advanced inventory management. It's Michelle Barr, who is a partner at Firefly Business Group. You are definitely going to be in good hands today. I will go ahead and let her take it over from here.
Good afternoon, everybody. As Lauren introduced me, my name is Michelle Barr, and I'm going to go over today some of the different things that I see from a consulting perspective with Acctivate that I have seen over the years. Just kind of point out some of the positives and negatives and things that I see that happen with customers all the time, things that we maybe have to retrain, we clean up, just different various topics that I think might be beneficial for the users to hear. So I appreciate all of you taking your time to attend the webinar today. I appreciate Acctivate, Allterity, and Acctivate to allow us to present to you, and I hope that everybody at least walks away with something new that they've learned, maybe hopefully a couple things new. I'm sure you are going to see things that you already know, but that's a positive that you are learning the software and that you do know stuff, but I bet I'll find something that you don't know. So let's get forward. Here's my contact information. I will post this at the end of the session as well. Lauren's going to be providing responses in the chat box, so if you type questions during the webinar, I won't pause during the webinar to answer those. She will. Who is Firefly? Firefly, we're a business and software consulting service. We have 5 consultants. We provide assistance remotely, and we travel on site all over the country to provide software use efficiency. So we review how you've been using the software, how we can help you better utilize the software, training, new implementations, old implementations, custom reports. We have a full-time report writer, and just daily support and assistance for our customer base. We are a gold certified consulting partner and been working with the Acctivate product since 2003. Some of you may recognize me that haven't seen me in a while, but I used to be the support and implementation manager at Acctivate several years ago. So still running the product, and everything's going great. So enough about me. Let's get into the presentation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go back and forth on some do's and don'ts. And I have a few examples to show you on some of the things, so I will kind of go back and forth. But, you know, just basically, as I had mentioned in the beginning of the webinar, I want to make sure that you understand what I see from a perspective of issues of cleaning things up from different customers or retraining or problems. One of the things I don't have on the slide is I want you to understand, and let me kind of back out of the slide for a few seconds here. One of the things I want you to understand is that Acctivate menu, where it comes to inventory issues, receipts, adjustments, transfers, assemblies, balance adjustments, all of these are inventory transactions. From a warehouse perspective, all of them are intentional to change quantities. But the reverse side of it is all of them have an accounting impact, whether that accounting impact is a cost, a unit cost on the product, or an accounting impact as far as how it posts over to the general ledger. And that is the side that not a lot of people who are managing the warehouse really have the perspective of. But the people in accounting, they'll get transactions and don't understand because maybe they don't understand Acctivate. It's really a situation where we need to watch both sides, and we need to understand how both sides work. Now, I may not necessarily be able to teach the warehouse person the accounting transaction because that's not something that, you know, is their education or is their job, and, you know, it's not relevant to them. But we can teach them, hey, if you do things a certain way, then it won't cause havoc on accounting. So it's a two-way street. So we try to approach every transaction so a lot of the advice I'm approaching today is from a point of view of how those transactions will impact the quantity and the unit cost within Acctivate, but also how will it impact the accounting side as well. So that's where I kind of come up with some of my do's and don'ts. So the first one that I listed was inventory issue. So it's a pretty safe transaction. A lot of people will try to use this transaction to take things out of inventory. Its intention is to take things out of inventory. So when I put in this item, if I put in, let's say, a B10 item here, and I put in 5, it's going to pull 5 out of inventory. I have seen customers use a reverse issue, very rarely, but if you wanted to do that, then it would be a -5, okay? The biggest thing about this is I can pick my GL expense account here. And a lot of customers that I've trained over the years to use this transaction, we're going to use it to maybe pull stuff out for a trade show that we want to expense out of inventory to a very specific expense account. Maybe I want to choose marketing expense. Maybe it's samples. I have two different methods for how I like to do samples. It depends if we're shipping the samples or if we're just handing them out. If we're shipping them, then let's do them through a sales order, and I could teach you some really good ways to track that. If it's scrap, possibly some customers will have some scrap material and they want to expense the item very specifically to a scrap GL account. So this is a way that you and accounting can work together and post things very specifically to certain expense accounts. That's not our standard inventory adjustment. Now this came up as inventory adjustment because that's a default in configuration under the warehouse setup. You can have a default, but it's not necessarily required. So the next one I wanted to bring up was adjustment and transfers. Both of those are very safe. So what they're going to do is just adjust inventory from a quantity perspective. I'm going to do a positive or negative into an inventory adjustment. If I do a positive, it adds to inventory. If I do a negative, it will subtract from inventory. So very straightforward. The GL count is already defined in configuration, and that's to either cost of goods sold or inventory adjustment. We usually talk with accounting on how we want to set that up early on. One thing about inventory adjustments is it does not manage cost. So whatever the average cost of the product is, or based on the unit cost that you've defined on your product setup, is the cost that it will use. I have no control over cost here, good and bad, and I'll talk about that here in a couple minutes. But it's a pretty safe transaction for warehouse personnel to use to adjust the inventory to make it accurate. The other one is my inventory transfer function. This is just going to transfer from warehouse to warehouse or possibly from bin to bin. So if I have the multi-location module, no cost associated here as well, just a pretty straightforward transaction. The one that gets everybody into trouble is called the balance adjustment transaction. And that is this one right here. If you do not really understand how it's going to impact your system, and all you're trying to do is a quantity adjustment, then just step away from it. Don't even go there. Just use your regular old adjustment transaction to manage your inventory quantity. The balance adjustment is reserved for if we have to devalue our inventory, or possibly sometimes we have to use it because cost is not exactly accurate and I need to adjust it to get things right. But it has some special powers, and those special powers of what it can do can really mess people up as to what it's doing. I can quickly run through what it's going to do for you, and so you can kind of get an understanding, but if you really don't care what it's going to do, then just listen to me by avoiding it unless you have proper training and know what it's going to do. The biggest thing of understanding it is it's date sensitive. It knows what date it is. And so if I backdate it and I try to change it to a particular point in time, it's going to go back and look at the inventory at the value at that point in time. If I pick a product and I post something through here, so let me just put a particular one in here real quick just to bring up the message. When I make the changes here, it's almost like I'm changing things at the point in time, like I can change it right there on the inventory screen. I don't have 480. I now have 460 if I wanted to change quantity. If I put in a 20, then my entire inventory is going to go to a 20. That's not what usually people want to do. If I do a 480, maybe I want to change it to $2.10. So it's changing my value or my quantity, whatever I do, and the result that I have here is what is going to be the result in inventory. The difference is the actual adjustment that it's going to make. Now, when I go to post this as a 331 for this item on D, save and post, it is going to ask us a question. This is a very key, important question. Basically, what it's saying is, do you solemnly swear that you are not going to go back and backdate any transactions prior to this one? Because if you do, this transaction will magically change and it will revert to what you said it was going to be at the end of the day on 3/31. And so this is where it really trips a lot of customers up, is it will constantly change itself because you have told the system that as of the end of the day on 3/31, and when I say end of the day, all the transactions that had happened prior to this transaction have already been counted and figured in. This will determine itself as the very last transaction on this date, and this will be what the current inventory value is, no matter if you post something prior to it or not. So it's a very powerful transaction. If you're not sure what you're doing and you really don't want to have issues, then avoid it. If you need help with it, then contact me. I can help you. Contact Alterity, and we're more than happy to do training with you to make sure you understand it. Okay? So that's the balance adjustment, and I just like to get the word out because we do see that being an issue a lot of times. Okay, so moving forward, assemblies. You know, this is an interesting conversation. Do not do a negative assembly. Let me show you. There's a way of doing a negative assembly and doing it differently. And my issue with it is if you are using any other costing method besides standard cost, then it is not going to do exactly what you thought it was going to do from a costing perspective. From a quantity perspective, it will pull everything out and put everything right back into stock just the way you would imagine. From a costing perspective, unless you're using standard cost or unless you have all of your items have had the same cost forever, then it will work just perfectly beautiful. If it doesn't, if you're using something like average cost, like such as this coffee French roast that I'm using, then what it'll do is it will create extra transactions for you. I'm fine with that as long as you're fine with it. I just want you to understand you can do negative assemblies. The system works, but just make sure you understand the costing impact. This item went in as a positive 100. It came out. I sent in another one at another positive 100 at a different cost. So what it's going to do is it's going to average the two of them together and pull it back out at the average cost of this product. So realize that when I do this, this balance adjustment is creating a financial transaction to my expense statement. So this $325 is now no longer part of inventory, and it went to the expense statement within QuickBooks. As long as you understand this and you're good with this, then go for it. Continue doing negative assemblies. If you want to come up with a different way, I have something I'm going to show you here in the next transaction that can get you around this. So I'm not telling you the software won't do it. It will, and it does a great job at it, but just I want you to understand the cost impact that could be happening in your system that not everybody intends to happen. Okay, receipts. Only use with a PO, and I have two exceptions. Okay, so the reason why I tell you to only use with a PO, I spend probably hours every month helping different customers one by one reconcile an account called accrued purchase receipts. Doesn't matter to the warehouse people, but it does matter to the accounting people. And when my warehouse people use transactions through the receipt screen that aren't tied to a PO, then it does have a higher impact of making my accrued purchase receipts out of balance. Okay? So there's a couple exceptions there. One is the lot and serial. The only way we can get lot and serial inventory into the system is through the receipt. So let's say I'm walking around the warehouse or doing inventory count or whatever the situation may be, and I find an extra serialized product that wasn't in there. I don't really have a choice. If I want to get that serialized product into inventory, then what I need to do is I need to do it through the receipt screen. So I'm going to bring in this one PC20, I'm going to put a serial number in it, and I'm going to go ahead and post it to my inventory, and that's how I need to get this guy in here. That's fine. That's exactly what you have to do. But we need to alert accounting so they could do a journal entry to follow up this receipt, because they're not expecting, this is kind of like an inventory adjustment. They're not expecting a vendor bill to clear this item. So they need to do a journal entry to move it from accrued purchase receipts to inventory adjustments so the accounting gets cleaned up. That's all. It's just a two-step process instead of a one-step process. And so if you're doing this now, then just let's make sure we notify accounting to get involved. I can help you guys come up with the procedures with this. We have great reports. Anything you can to help you with balancing that account, just let us know. It's an ongoing effort, but we can teach you ways to make it better. Okay. The next exception down here below is adjust inventory for incorrect assemblies or possibly a packaging change. Okay, so let me just do a packaging change. And what does that mean? A packaging change would be that, well, for instance, let me bring up my two items I have set up. So I have an S23-2, which is a laminate bookcase with 2 shelves. And I have an S23-3, which is a laminate bookcase with 3 shelves. And let's say I have these 20 in my D warehouse, but my customer is trying to purchase the 2 shelf. They don't want the 3 shelf. They want the 2 shelf, and possibly they're different pricing, right? And I want to convert my 3 shelf to some 2 shelves. So I want to go ahead and take 10 out of the 3 and put them to the 2. Well, most people would just go do an inventory adjustment. Okay, we'll take 3 out of this one, 10 out of the 3 and put 10 into the 2. If the cost value of the 2 is different from the 3, then you're going to have a variance that goes to inventory adjustments. And maybe that's fine. But if you wanted to manage the cost of this transaction, and I wanted everything that's part of the 3 shelf to go into the cost of the 2 shelf, then I could do that from a receipt screen. And if I do it properly, then I will keep all my costing correct. I won't impact accrued purchase receipts. So let me just kind of show you how I would do that. So if I do an S23-3, and I'm going to pull out a -10 of $725. I'm going to now do an S23-2, and I'm going to put in 10. What I should have done is I should have set this guy up. Let me see if I can do that real quick, with a last cost of $60. Okay, so now let me pull this guy up. Okay, and put an S23-2. Now I'm going to put 10 in here. This is exactly what's happening in the inventory adjustment screen. It's going to take this guy out at $725 and put this guy in at $600. So you have no control of the cost in the inventory adjustment screen. So in effect, you have a net effect of $125 that's coming out of your asset account into a inventory adjustment account to manage this transaction. But if you do it through the receipt screen, then what you can do is you can manage this and do $72.50 here, and then that will take 10 out of inventory at this cost and put 10 into inventory here. Now we're assuming that the 3rd shelf gets tossed, it gets absorbed, whatever you want to do. Now let's talk about this as an assembly. What if that 3rd shelf, I actually stock and sell those? So let me just set up an item called a shelf. So this would be kind of like a reverse assembly, right? Same concept. Put it to other and give myself a warehouse and say my last cost of this is $7.25. Save. Okay. So if we take it a step further, let's say, well, I want to put this in at 60, and I'm going to bring this in at shelf, and I'm going to do 10 here. Well, did I equal 0? That's my question. I don't want you to ever do this without promising me that you will make sure that it equals 0 before you post. Because if you don't net out to 0, then what's going to happen is it's going to do a transaction into accrued purchase receipts. You can check it. You can hit save, and you can print it so you don't have to get out your calculator, and you can say, oh, I'm off $52.50. What do I want to do with that? Okay, well, maybe I'll absorb it into the shelf. Not into the shelf. Maybe I'll put it in here. So I don't have my calculator here handy, but let me do $652.50 and hit save and print. And let's see where I am now. I'm at 0. that is a proper use of the receipt screen to either do what's called a reverse assembly or possibly a packaging change. You want to decrease one item and then hit all your components to be what you want to restock, but always make sure you hit 0 and post that, and that will now put those into stock at the value that I want and decrease my -3s. So now I have 10 here. No accounting impact. It all hit a debit to inventory asset, a credit to inventory asset, as long as I'm in the same warehouse. And I've effectively managed a quantity change by managing that cost. Non-inventory. This is another one that I see, and I've seen it recently, that people get confused on the non-inventory. So, all right, let's just create one. So we're going to call this B152. Okay, and that's non-inventory. Okay, so what I'm trying to tell you here is you have two choices. You have none and you have standard. Let's go with none, because if we go with standard, then we're really requesting the system to do something extremely special, and I'll tell you what that means. None means that it's just an item in the list. I'm not doing any kind of accounting for it. I'm not doing quantity tracking. I'm not doing cost tracking. It is just an item in the list that I'm going to reuse. I could do sales tracking, and I could do purchase order tracking because it has a history tab. So I know what sales order it's been on, what purchase orders, and so I can have tracking from a reporting point of view. But from a costing point of view, it needs to be none. If you select standard, then what's going to happen is it's going to require us to have a warehouse. We're going to add a warehouse. And then it's going to require a standard cost. Now, this standard cost that I put in here, $50, is now going to be an accounting transaction. Every time I sell this item or I assemble this item, it's going to go over to my financial statements, and it's going to pull this cost from my financial statements and bring it through the transaction within Acctivate. Now, some companies I've seen, they've accidentally set this up, and the net effect is 0 because it's debiting and crediting the same account. But let me just kind of give you a quick glance of where this account is set up. So if I go into configuration, I go into inventory warehouse, this tab right here. If I leave everything empty, no accounts, and I try to use that product at standard cost, because I can't stop the warehouse people from accidentally setting standard costs, or the person who's responsible for setting up product, I can't prevent them from setting standard costs. It's not an option in the software. But what I can do is keep these accounts blank, and I'll show you what will happen. But if, in fact, I do intend to use standard costs, and I'm going to go into an example of labor in a little bit, then I want these accounts to be set up. And these are called contra accounts from an accounting point of view, or an offset account. It will take the expense from the financial statements and move it into, if it's an assembly, move it into the value of my inventory. If it's an item that I just outright sell, then it's going to take it and deduct it from this account and probably move it to cost of goods sold, whatever the product class is. So just realize that that is a accounting transaction. Now, I promised you, if I leave this blank, I'll show you what happens. So let me go into a sales order and sell it. If I put in a B152, no, I'm going to do it at D, and I'm going to do 20. Oh, hold on. Let me go change it back to, no, let me do it standard. That's right. That's what I wanted to do. Okay. Now, if I hit create my invoice, it's going to give me an error. And this error is telling me the non-inventory cost offset is not set. So most of us will go figure out where that is, or we might reach out to support and say, where is this set? Why am I getting this error? Well, you might, or find it on the help site. You might then be inclined to go set up that GL account. Well, let me show you the better answer. If you really don't intend to have a financial impact on this, come back here, find the product, just simply change it to none, and then hit save. Now when you release, it's going to just sell the item, and the cost will not be involved. Okay? Multiple unit of measure. So I'm just kind of picking out different things in the software. And some of you who I've been training and working with for many, many years, one of the things that I found when I work with you later after you've been using it for a few years is that we don't know about all the new features that have been added to the software. So let me just kind of stop and show something that hopefully you all know that is there and how it works. So let me just pull up my BB86. Okay, so this item I have stocked as an each. I have it sold as by the case of 10, purchased by the case of 10, packaging. So let me show you what each one of these means. Sales means if it's on the sales order. Now I can probably sell it as an each or a case. I could set up alternatives here if I wanted to, sell it by the each. It's just standard. It's going to do that. But maybe I also want to sell it by a pack of 5. Okay. So if we go and set all that up, then we would probably need to kind of set up some pricing that does the same thing. So realize that the system can do multiple sales unit measures. If we just sell it by the same stocking unit, which by the way, my stocking unit needs to be the lowest common denominator, the lowest unit that I'm going to transact in. If I just want to sell it by the each and stock it by the each, then just leave it at the each. But my purchasing may be by the case. So the sales impacts sales orders, the purchasing impacts purchase orders. Packaging is sometimes just, for most of the customers, it's just a descriptor. I have one customer that just uses it just so when they get to the specs tab, they can get the case in the each metrics. And we use it with reporting. So it's not having any functionality in the system unless you have EDI and you use the packaging manager module. Otherwise, its intention is to do some really cool stuff when we go into EDI. And you can have the packaging manager module and not have EDI if you want to be a pick and pack operation and have our labels show all the items, or a shipping ticket that says this is what's in this box and these are all the items in it. If you want to be that kind of operation, you can be, but it's effort and it needs to be worth it. But that's what the packaging is for. Otherwise, like I said, I have a customer who doesn't use it for anything but to have these 2 tabs, and they want to record metrics. And we use it on all sorts of reports. Okay, purchasing. Let me show you how that works. So one of the things about the purchasing that I want to make sure you understand of is when you use this, you need to make sure the person who's placing the purchase orders and the person who's receiving understands that we have a metric here and we're doing the conversion. Because if everybody isn't on the same boat, then we have different people doing different things, and it gets very confusing. And guess what? We'll mess up our transactions. Last thing I wanted to show you. I can set up on the vendor tab the unit of measure of how I purchase. So I have Martin vendor purchasing by the each, and I have the Adams vendor purchasing by the case. So it is possible to set that up and to do it that way if it is something you want to track. Okay, so let me do Adams. I want to purchase it by the case. Adams paper. Okay, so it's an issued purchase order. And I am going to buy my BB86, and I'm going to get 20 cases at $85. Pretty straightforward, like you had expected it to work. Now, the difference is in the receipt. So when I go to receive this item, if I receive it at 20 cases, it is going to work beautifully. It's going to bring in 2,000 pieces immediately. If the person who is doing the receipts maybe sees something on the box and says, wait a minute, this is 2,000, and they try to bring it in like that, then guess what? We're going to really mess up our cost and mess up our inventory really fast. So that's something that you really have to be careful of. But if I did want to receive it to the each, we would need to receive it in at 2,000. But you don't necessarily have to do that. That kind of defeats the purpose. So if I do it by the case, then it's going to come in at the 2,000. Hopefully that makes sense to everybody. I'll go ahead and post it and show you the conversion. Close this, refresh this. So it converted it the other way. It received 200. I'm stocking it by the each and buying it by the case, and so it was converting it the other way. Okay, so that is multiple unit of measure. Okay, inventory count. The biggest thing that you have to understand about the inventory counts is this screen is here for a purpose. It is supposed to remind you that all movement has to be stopped. If we don't stop our movement, then the whole inventory count is just going to be a big mess. What you need to know is that anything that has been received and put away on the shelf needs to happen in the computer. If you've received it and you have it set aside in a staging area and you haven't put it away on the shelf and you don't plan to count it, you're good. No big deal. Just make sure that you know, don't count this. I've received it. I've not received it in the computer. But if you have received it in the computer, then you need to count it. And specifically, if you put it on the shelf, then you need to make sure you receive it in the computer. If you have pulled stuff from the shelf, if you have not invoiced those orders, then you need to go invoice them before you print your count sheets. The point of time that I print that count sheet, the system is doing what's called a freeze count at the moment in time I print those count sheets. And so everything has to happen before I print them. It must be printed moment before the count is started. And the reason why we're doing that is because I can't say, well, I'm going to do an inventory count tomorrow, and let me go ahead and get everything printed at noon today and get everything organized and on the clipboards and the pins out and get everything ready. And then later that day, accounting's still invoicing out for that day's sales. Because those count sheets and that count are very time specific. You need to make sure accounting is done with their work, receiving is done with their work, and everything is done before I print those count sheets. So you can get them ready, but you need to get them ready the night before and then have them ready that morning with no transactions happening in the system. So just be aware that this is a very critical moment in time before you do that. The system is going to copy the quantity on hand at the point in time you print the count sheets. It stores it in the file, and then it waits. It waits until you enter the count. Okay? So my next slide is, can I change the date? No. It locks in that date at the moment in time you print those count sheets. Every single year on January 5th, we get the call, hey, I needed this to post in December, but it's not going to post in December. What do? Well, your inventory has changed from December to January 5th. So if we post it, if we allowed you to post it in December, then it's kind of incorrect because everything has changed. You need to print the count sheets on December 31st. Don't wait until January 5th to print them. Get all your transactions done and print them on December 31st. Now, can I print them January 5th, even though I haven't had any transactions? Yes, you can. Will it post January 5th? Yes, but I need that value change to be in December. We'll do a journal entry. Don't mess with the count. Don't mess with Acctivate. Do a journal entry that puts the value into the prior year and do a reversing journal in the new year. I don't generally recommend doing journal entries to the inventory asset account because it makes it out of balance. And yes, by the way, this would make the inventory valuation out of balance, but just know if you plan on the value to hit December 31st, then print your count sheets on December 31st, but get your transactions done first. The next bullet point, an entry of account can be completed later, but if you wait, you won't see the variance of results. Meaning that I can go print account sheets and count, and theoretically in the system, I can go enter my count 2 weeks later. Well, sure you can, but then if somebody counted something wrong, you won't know that for 2 weeks. So don't hold on to it. Make a day of it. Get the pizza in and the donuts and all that stuff. Make a day of it and do your count the way the system wants you to do the count and get it all done and have people, if once we post it, we have a huge variance, have them go check the quantity again, send a different team out. It's really important that, you know, the inventory count be right, but it's only as good as everybody who's putting the effort into doing it right. Okay? If you own the multiple bin location module, you should be using zones. It's a really cool thing. So let me kind of show you what that is. I'm going to do well, first off, let me show you where it is. In configuration, I set up under location module. I think for my F warehouse, I got a few zones, just a couple A's and a B's. So you could define it here. So I have an inventory print count sheet. I'm going to do it for my F warehouse. And I'm just going to limit to other. And when I use the zones, I absolutely need to select by one of these locations. So I'm going to choose location product ID as my sort. So realize that that sequence is very important. And let me make sure, let me back out for 2 seconds. I was testing this earlier, make sure I delete any count sheets, and I don't have any. Okay, great. That's important as well. You have to make sure your count sheets are deleted if you have any test cases that you are working on, or those products will not end up on the count. Location, product ID, and yes, I've been a good girl. I've done everything I was told to do. So when I print my count sheets, when I do a zone, what's happening is it's going to break it up into different locations or different zones of my warehouse, so to speak. So everything that I've identified in my zone A, which locations I've identified in zone A, will go on its own count sheet. And zone 3, or page 3, or whatever you want to call it, transaction 3 is what it really is. Zone B, I have these two going to B. The first page is allowing me to say these are all the things that didn't have a zone. So zones are really cool if you have that module. It really helps manage the inventory count. The other thing I like about it is when I go into my inner count, they are 3 separate transactions. But do realize, so it makes it easy for the entry, but do realize when I post, it's going to post them all 3 at the same time. So I don't get to post them separately. It just kind of helps manage them, and it manages the printout for them. So it is something that can be helpful. Another comment about the inventory count is I did notice with some testing today that it does now pick up the last cost, which is really cool. I didn't used to do that. So if I have an item that, let's see, I think I have my New York strip item. In my F warehouse, I don't have any quantity in it, but now if I enter my cost and put in, $10 last cost on here, when I go in and I put that I have 30 of these, and that's all I'm going to post right now. I didn't count anything else. Realize that a 0 does mean 0. An empty count means I didn't count it. So I didn't count anything else but this one guy, so I'm just going to post it without hitting zeros and everything else. And when I hit refresh, then it did pick up my last cost for this item, and it does assign a value. Really cool opportunity. I'm not sure when this was added in Acctivate, but I was really excited to see that because we have that problem when we do a lot of new startups. Okay, what else about the counts did I want to tell you? We do some things with counts that help us outside of Acctivate. We have a little utility that you can contact us about purchasing. You can import count from a spreadsheet. So you could export the entire count to a spreadsheet. For some reason, it's a lot easier on a lot of people. Or we get a spreadsheet from our 3PL, third-party logistics warehouse, and we can import it into the system. We have a lot of pre-post variance reports, so we can see and sort and understand our variances before I post it. We also have a cycle count program, which can help you set up ABC cycle counting and make sure you're counting every single item once per time period specified versus doing the whole big annual count. You could still do an annual count, but this will allow you to help you do things. So it's still using 100% Acctivate, but just a few little reports and little utilities that we've used to kind of just help make it a lot more fun, or I guess capable, I guess is a better word. Since when is inventory count fun, right? Okay. Manufacturing tips. Okay, so these are a few things. I work with a lot of different manufacturing companies, and so I wanted to kind of point out some things. And if you're not manufacturing, don't worry, I'm going to get through this quickly, and I'm going to give you some more information that you might be interested in. Manufacturing tips. So best use of assembly transaction. So if I create an assembly. So I'm going to go into inventory assembly, and I'm going to create coffee. Okay, and I'm going to make 10 bags of this. Okay, so this is kind of a do and don't of inventory assembly. You do want to create these when you're ready to create the demand. So I hope everybody by now knows this, but if we don't, I'm here to teach you. So if we bring up that coffee, I now have an assembly column that says I have demand started. And it will let people in the, when we're trying to determine how much we have to meet availability, et cetera, it is considered in that I have this coming. We're making decisions based on this information. This is good information. If I go to my components, then I have a WIP column. This is extremely important to have this WIP column. And the reason why it's important is it creates our purchasing demand. So we know that the demand has been created to make these. So some people will set up assemblies ahead of time knowing that they need to push out the purchasing demand to buy the items. And so this will, as you can see right here, this 10 is impacting my 23.97 on hand, is impacting my availability, reducing it down so I can't sell it to somebody else, which will also in turn increase my purchasing demand to go buy it. And especially if my min-maxes are being hit for this particular item. Let's say my min-max was set at, I guess it would have to be somewhere between 23.87, 23.97, but I think you guys get the picture. So if I come back here, create it and save the to establish demand. Delete unwanted assemblies. So with all that said, let's say I just went on and forgot to do, I don't really need that one, like my number 43 here. This is sitting in here causing unnecessary demand. Do not leave assemblies unposted. Clean this up. Clean up what's in here instead of leaving it there because it's causing purchasing demand. This could cause a lot of confusion in the system. So just hit this little red X. I always see a lot of people hit this little red X. That deletes just the transaction. So we have multiple transactions. Hit the delete button and it'll delete the entire session. So hit that big red X and it'll take it away. And then now we only have the one that I needed. Okay. Another one, use the split transaction option. Okay. That one came out, gosh, I don't know, a year or so ago, and that one's pretty cool. So what happens is this one, I was going to make 10, something happened, I didn't get but 6 done today. So this little split transaction button here is say that we only completed 6 and hit OK. And then what it's going to do is it's going to go ahead and create another assembly for the other 4. Now it did change. You can kind of see it morphing. I have a 56 and a 57, but I have 4 here. This guy went to a 6. And then now I could leave this 4 on demand and post the 6. They can have, this one will stay with the transaction date where I started, where this one I can push out to a future date if I need to. So very cool functionality that was brought into Acctivate is a split transaction. Another cool thing is the workflow status. The interesting thing is I haven't really used it much with customers on assemblies. I could see the power of it. I use it a lot with customers on sales orders. We do a lot of really cool stuff with it. But from an assembly point of view, we have the same functionality here. We can set up custom workflows. We can, and basically what it is, it's just a flag to let everybody in the plan or do reports, or we have dashboards that let everybody know where the progress is for assemblies. If you are having assemblies and you create them and post them, 30 seconds later, then it doesn't really matter. But if you do have a lot of open assemblies for a period of time, then it does matter. And you should be using workflow status. The cool thing is, just like in the sales change workflow order status here, we have an inventory change assembly workflow status. And what these screens allow you to do is to use scanners in your warehouse. So you just have what's called a wedge scanner, or sometimes I call it a dumb scanner. but you set it to be whatever assembly status you want. Same concept for sales orders. And you scan the barcode at the top of the workflow, at the top of the work order, because when you print these assemblies, you get a work order. When it's not posted, it prints a work order and it has a barcode on it. So we scan the barcode, and then as soon as I scanned it, so let's say beep, I scan number 57. Oops, wasn't supposed to change. I scan that and hit change it, then it should be changing my workflow status, which it didn't really help me because I kept it the same workflow status. I think you get the concept. So that can just give visibility. Like I said, do a lot with customers on sales orders, and we can kind of see in the management of the orders throughout the whole process. A lot of reports, we do dashboards, TVs, all sorts of cool stuff. Labor can be a component. I get this question a lot. If we're doing manufacturing, can labor be a component? Well, the answer is yes. If we go back to my coffee guy, I have labor as a component in here. Now, you can have it, it works really well with the variable build manufacturing module to where I can go in and change it and say, well, this time it took, when I'm making this 4, normally it would take 0.20 minutes, I guess, or whatever that conversion is, but this time it took, 1 hour. So edit this, put in 1 hour here. So as I'm getting ready to post my assembly, I can change this. Why can I change this? Because I have the variable build batch module. And so I have determined that labor is a variable component, so I can change it on the fly. Now, my slide mentioned financially adding to the value of the inventory based on standard cost and non-inventory setup. So what does that mean? What that means is if my labor component is set as none versus standard is how it's going to transact with it. If I have it set at standard, it can take my standard cost and add the value of my labor component into the assembly cost. But remember what I trained you on earlier. If I have it at standard cost, it's got to take the money from the financial statement and move it to this labor. So it's going to do a negative to, let's say, manufacturing expense account, payroll expense account, move the value into this finished assembly as a labor value, and then when it's sold, it will take it and post it all to cost of goods sold. Or what you can do is you could leave it at none. You could use what's called a management cost, and then we could just do all that in reporting. And we don't have a financial impact on QuickBooks for the labor, but we can write all sorts of great reports for you. And you can still then change this and keep track of the labor per assembly, as well as all the other components as to what's going on here. Assembly versus kitting, standard versus custom. Well, I get this question a lot, and it's been changing. We now have the custom kitting module, and so I've actually been changing several of my customers who we originally have as assemblies, and now we're doing some custom kitting. So it is something that we can look at. So what are the thought processes? Well, do we stock the finished good? If we only make to order, kitting is make to order. Assembly is make for stock. So if I'm going to stock it, if I'm going to have any, and I'm going to make it for stock ahead of time, no matter if I make it for order or not, then it needs to be an assembly, or you have to have 2 different products in the system. But if I don't really ever stock it, I only make it when a customer orders it, then let's do kitting. Kitting didn't have the functionality. I mean, it's been around for a couple years now, but it didn't used to have the functionality where it can do custom kitting. So it really makes a lot more capability within the system to be able to do custom kits if we really are true a make-to-order environment. So that's where, do we stock it? Can any of the quantity be variable? Is the bill of material flexible, and are the components lot or serialized? The reason why I asked about the components being lot or serialized, if you have multiple lot or serial numbers going into an assembly as a component, then you need the variable assembly. I believe the standard kit could handle that as is, but realize we have assembly comes with the system, kitting is a module, variable assembly comes with as a module, and custom kitting is a module. So I can talk with you personally to help you unclear any of that confusion. But let me show you just super quickly, because I want to close out on this on a couple of tips, what a custom kit looks like. Custom kitting is DS10. Okay. So all it is it's the same thing. It's custom. We have variable components. Some are variable, some are not. So when I put this guy on a sales order, what this is going to allow me to do is when I go to my components, then you can see I have add, delete, revert. This guy has a 0 quantity. So that means it's not going to be used. It's just there as an optional item. I could take this guy and delete this one. I could take this guy and say I want to do one of these instead. And so this is a really magical module and allows you to do a lot more things that we didn't have before. So something to take a look at. Add-on modules. Okay, this is Michelle Barr's industry experience, just a few little pluses and minuses on different modules. Dropship special order. Dropship is great, love it. If you do dropship, if you dropship any kind of quantity of drop shipments. The only issues that people have is the invoice for the purchase invoice needs to be in the same period as the sales order invoice. If it crosses periods and it's in a substantial amount, then we kind of have a counting headache. This is not the fault of anybody. I mean, it's just the way software works. It's the way QuickBooks works, and it's just something to really understand if you're using that module. Special order module. That allows us to tie a sales order to a purchase order very specifically, a wizard that will tie them both together. It is inventory. It's going to bring it into our inventory, but it allows us for all sorts of reporting and cool things that we can do with that. So if you do order a lot of products for your customer for that are special order, then let's look at that module. But realize there's a difference in setup if I'm going to also stock the module or not, because we could have a separate warehouse, we could have the same warehouse. I could talk you through the pros and cons of that, but it's a really cool module. Multiple bin location control. It is cool when I show you the zones, but realize what you're asking for. It is not necessary for multiple warehouses. Multiple warehouses come out of the box standard. It is necessary if I have one product within a warehouse that could be in 3 different places in that warehouse, and I really need to know the quantity within each location. It requires a lot of overhead, good, bad, or indifferent. No matter what software you're in, you have to manage and tell every transaction what quantity I'm going to bring it in, what quantity I'm going to transfer it to, not quantity, but what bin, every single transaction you do. So if you're going to do that module, then you might really need to start looking at mobile handhelds. But you can handle it without the mobiles, but if you do multiple bin and serialized or lot control, then you kind of are asking for it. You kind of really need the mobile handheld because it really that's where you're going to get an efficiency gain. The negatives on multiple bin is I don't like that it doesn't have a primary picking and a primary receiving. A lot of people do work that way. Realize there's one primary, and that's exactly how that module wants to work. So if you want to understand it before you buy it, that's something that we can help you with. But you also need to make sure that if you have your shelves, you need to put the special tags on your shelf. It has to have a special indicator in that barcode on the shelf if you're going to use the mobile modules with the multiple bins. So just realize that. Landed cost, I have nothing horrible to say about it. It's a great module. If we're not using it, we should be using it. And what it does is it adds the extra duty, freight, any imports that I'm getting overseas, I want to bring those into the system. It's a great way to manage the purchase invoices and the accounting, and it's a great module, really cool. Mobile handheld modules. I can give you positive and negatives. This is really talking about barcoding. I really like to talk to my customers and make sure they understand everything that they're talking about on these modules first, because a lot of people have this enamored view of what barcoding is and what happens when I scan it, and they think that they could just scan it and just go to lunch. It's a very expensive direction, and it costs a lot to get all the equipment and get the warehouse set up, and I've seen a lot of customers over the years invest everything into this, and then they don't use it. So it is great. I'm not dogging these modules. I'm just saying make sure you have eyes wide open and understand everything before you jump into that. I do have an emulator. I know Acctivate does as well, which means we can show you and walk through stuff on the screen and help you make decisions. I've kind of hit the things about the variable batch build, great module. Custom kitting, another great module. Web store integration, that's really cool, but we also remember we have our sales order import, so we don't necessarily have to always use that module. It's great. It cuts down on a lot of clicks. They do allow some custom programming that's associated with it. My only downfall with that module is it only sends quantity available to the website, so we have to get custom programmers involved to send other information. Some other ways that I've worked around that, I throw up here this Knowledge Sync product with Firefly. It's a database monitoring tool. It can email reports. It can tell you certain thresholds are being met, dates aren't being met. It could send files to your website. Really cool product. If you have an interest, let me know. And absolutely, this Acctivate help site has become phenomenal. You could log in and set your email address in here, and it will send you emails every time they post a new article. Start using this if you haven't been using it. I use it all the time, and I'm an industry expert. So definitely use this. Sign up for the emails for all the different articles. The support team is doing an amazing job at posting articles in here, so you should be doing that. I hope you had a great webinar today.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That was some really great information. So I hope y'all learned a lot and got some really good information out of here, and have a great day.
Thank you. Have a great day.